Hi guys, hello, welcome to today's video. It's officially June, so it's time to do our May reading wrap up. I feel like May was kind of like the month of series. I feel like every single book that I read was either part of a series, finishing a series, starting a series. I don't think I read a single standalone. And per usual, before we actually get into the details of the books, we're gonna go over a little bit of some stats. The first stat being the total amount of books that we read in May. And I read 11 books, which I feel really good about. Especially because very similarly to last month, I felt like I wasn't really reading much throughout the month. I don't know why I have that feeling, because last month, again, I felt the same way, but I think I ended up the month with like 9 books or something like that. So clearly I'm reading, but for whatever reason, it doesn't feel like I'm reading that much. Anyway, breaking down those 11 books, 7.5 of them were physical books, 4 of them were Kindle books, and half of one was an audiobook. Basically, I flipped between the audiobook and the physical book for one total book of the month. Now that we have our stats kind of out of the way, let's go ahead and start jumping into the actual books. I read Paper Princess last month, which is the first book in a series, and I immediately became completely obsessed with it. And I tried so freaking hard to try to get the rest of the series for free somehow. I looked on Libby, I looked at my library, I looked on Kindle Unlimited. Like, I could not find these books for the life of me. I was on a book buying ban, so I was trying really hard to not purchase the books, but I simply could not find them anywhere for free. So I ended up just purchasing the entirety of the rest of the series. And I'm not going to go into detail about this series in particular because I did talk a lot about it last month when I talked about this book. So if you want to kind of know more about the series, check out my last reading wrap up. But basically what I didn't realize when I was reading this series, what I will say is that these first 3 books are kind of their own trilogy. We do focus on Ella and Callum Royal, which is one of the brothers, whereas the 4th and 5th book focus on Easton and Hartley, Easton being one of the other billionaire brothers. I didn't realize that when I got into the books, and at first, honestly, even though Easton is one of my favorite characters from the series, I didn't know how I was gonna feel about that. And I will say I didn't love the last 2, his story, as much as I did these ones. I still really enjoyed the series as a whole. So I definitely would highly recommend. I don't know what I would give it as far as like a star rating. Maybe like a 4.5 for the series as a whole, but like these first 3 books, maybe like a 5, and the second 2 like a 4. The next book that I have to talk about is one of my favorites from this entire month, and it was our first Kindle book for the month, which was Married to the Alien Mountain Man, which is, I think, the 5th book. I'm starting to lose track. From the Cowboy Colony Mail Order Bride series. I have talked about this series so much, to the point where every single time I talk about it now, I talk about how much I talk about it. But this is a series by Ursa Dax. It's a spicy, like, alien cowboy romance series. It is so much fun. This one specifically is about Oaken, who is one of the aliens that was supposed to already have gotten a bride, but the bride and one of the other aliens fell in love first, which that one we've already gotten, and I absolutely loved that story. But I definitely was like ready for Oaken to have his love story as well, and we finally got it. And Oaken, I think, is my new favorite. The second book, I think his name is Fallon. He was my favorite for like the longest time because he was just kind of like more of that golden retriever kind of energy. He just was so cute, so endearing. I didn't think someone was gonna be able to top Fallon, but I think Oaken has done that because he also has that same kind of like golden retriever type of energy, but like in a more adult way, if that makes sense. I would definitely rate this one a 5-star rating. Just the series in general is a 5-star for me. This book in particular was a 5-star for me. And then as far as like a spice rating, I would give this one kind of like a 2. I think that's what I've been giving the entire series so far, either a 2 or a 3. I don't really remember, but it is definitely a little bit more taboo with the nature of the spice because they are aliens. There's different parts and things like that. But also on the kind of like the opposite end of that, there isn't really that many scenes. There's usually only 1 to 2 per book. So it is a little bit different than your typical spice scene, but like there's not a whole lot. So I feel like that averages out to about a 2. Moving on to our next book, we have Wisteria, which is the book that I read physically and listened to the audiobook for. Honestly, the only reason I picked this up physically was because I do own it. I spent money on it, so I felt like I needed to at least crack it open a couple of times, you know? So anyway, this is the 3rd book in the Belladonna series, so I'm not going to talk about what it's about. I did actually mention this in a reading vlog, and I'll kind of repeat what I said there. The entire plot of this story in particular, this book, is a giant spoiler for the 2nd book, so I can't really talk about what it's about. And honestly, this one doesn't really have much to do even with the very first book. Like, it's a totally different vibe. We're talking about different characters, so talking about what the first one's about doesn't really help you with this one either. So I literally can tell you nothing to help you out plot-wise with this book, but just in general, I have really enjoyed this series. They are basically kind of romances with, the first two books had like murder mysteries involved. This one didn't. This one was like completely different, I feel like, than the first two, but it was really, really good. I did not take literally a single note for any of these books this entire month, and I haven't even thought of like star ratings or anything. Usually at the very least, I write notes the day before I film this video, but I'm kind of doing this spur of the moment. So I haven't thought at all about any of these books aside from like, you know, after I read them initially. So the star rating for this one, I think I would give this one, and just kind of like the series as a whole so far, probably like a 4-star rating. They're definitely really good. They're not my most favorite books in the world, but they are really good. I would recommend them. Hopefully that's helpful. Also, as far as the spice rating, there is no spice, so there's that, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, the next book that we read was City of Ghosts by V.E. Schwab, and I am so excited that I was finally able to read another V.E. Schwab book. When I first started this channel in early 2023, I read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue and absolutely loved it. And I have been wanting to read something from V.E. Schwab ever since, and I just haven't for whatever reason. I've even purchased some books. This was actually a book that one of you guys gifted to me, and I think actually that's what eventually pushed me to read it, because I didn't want like a book that one of you guys got me just sitting on my shelves forever. And also too, this one is a middle grade book, so I feel like knowing that it wasn't going to take me very long kind of pushed me to read it, if that makes sense. So anyway, this one's basically about a girl that drowned, and ever since then she's been able to step into the veil. She sees ghosts and things like that, and her best friend actually is a ghost. And essentially the plot of this is her and her family, like her mom and her dad are ghost hunters or something like that, and her parents get like this opportunity to film like a ghost hunting show in Scotland. So all of them go, and she and her best ghost friend are like running into these ghosts. She actually runs into another girl that can also see ghosts, and they go on little adventures and things like that. Again, it is a middle grade book, so it wasn't like something that I was like super sucked into, but it was definitely a really cute, fun story, and I definitely did like it enough to get the other two books from the library. So I do plan on finishing the series, hopefully this month in June. Sometimes I get these feelings, and I feel like I've been getting them a lot more recently, where I just want to read something really quick, and that's actually going to come up a little bit later as well. So I feel like this will be good for that. As far as the star rating goes, I think I would rate this, honestly, I don't even want to give this a star rating, to be honest, because it is a middle grade book. It's very much outside of like what I normally typically would read. I feel like I can't really score it against other things, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna actually skip doing a star rating for this. I did enjoy it. It was super cute. I'm gonna finish the series. And then obviously it is middle grade, so there was no spice. Moving on to the next book that we read in May, which was our book club book, which was The Games Gods Play by Abigail Owen. And this one I did read on my Kindle, and I had a pretty good time with this book, but I think I had more of a good time with it because of the book club. I did end up rating this one a 3 stars. It was definitely not my most favorite book, but I had, again, like a good time with it. This book is basically about the gods who hold a competition to kind of see who's going to be the next reigning god. But instead of them fighting for themselves, they enlist humans to fight for them. And the main character for our book is the champion that is playing for Hades. And 100% my favorite part of this entire book was the actual competitions themselves. I felt like they were really unique. They were really fun. There is also a little bit of like a romance as well between Hades and his champion. And I'm gonna be honest, that was kind of the part that like flopped the most for me and kind of brought down the star rating, because obviously I'm definitely here for the competition, but I'm going into this like fantasy romance looking for a romance, and I feel like it felt very insta-lovey. The tension of a romance, the build-up, the slow burn of it all is like my favorite part, and to not really get that kind of was a bummer. And I did write a review for this book, so I'm just gonna go ahead and read that. So I did give this one 3.75 stars. I said I don't typically do quarter star ratings, but this one was a tough one to rate, which I don't know, I was really conflicted because I did have a good time with it. Like there was things that I really liked about it, but then there was things that I just really didn't, specifically the romance. I loved all of the labors, which is what the competition like specific challenges were called, which is such a weird name for them. But I said I loved the labors and everything surrounding the competition. I also really liked the characters, and all the interactions between the competitors was fun. And I said the main thing that was missing for me was the tension in our love story. I could appreciate their interactions, and I did get giggly a few times, but I didn't ever really connect with the romance as a whole, which, yeah. Like, there were specific instances while I was reading where I was doing the whole, like, giggling, kicking my feet, loved every second of it, but, like, as a whole, I just didn't believe it. And then the next part of my review was actually a little bit of a spoiler, so I can't say that. But what I will say about kind of the example that I gave, this was another thing that really bothered me about the story overall, and kind of what gave it a lower rating, is there was a couple theories that I had that I felt really, really strongly about throughout the entire reading process of the book. And also because we were talking about it in the book club, some of you guys had some really cool theories as well. And I was hoping upon hoping that at least some of them would be true, but literally none of them were. It just kind of left me feeling like this book could have been so much better, but it just wasn't. You know what I mean? And there's one specific thing that I was 1000% convinced, and so many of you also in the book club were also thinking the same thing, and to find out that it wasn't what I thought, I was just kind of like, oh, I wish I could tell you what it was, because then I feel like I could articulate myself better. But like, it made other parts of the book not make sense in the end, which I don't know, I feel like as a whole the ending was kind of like anticlimactic, or like the wrap up of the story. That being said, the ending did leave off on a cliffhanger, and I am interested enough to read the next book. So it wasn't my most favorite book overall, but it was definitely a good time. Like, I had fun with it. Moving on to the next couple of books in our list, we have another kind of like series or like a spin-off duet that I ended up reading on my Kindle, which was Devour of Men and then Devour the Dark. And these are basically spin-offs of the Never King series from Nikki St. Crow, which I am absolutely obsessed with. I read the original series, the Never King series, early last year or the year before that, I don't remember, but I read it a long time ago. I still think about it every once in a while. Like, it was such a crazy, like, it's basically an erotica smut series about Peter Pan and one of Wendy's like great grandchildren. And it is White Shoes, which we know is like one of my favorite spice / like smut tropes. And the White Shoes is between obviously Peter and the descendant of Wendy, and then also 3 or 4 of the Lost Boys. They live in like a treehouse. They live in Neverland. These 2 books, however, are about Hook. And we did get like an appearance of Hook, I think, in the last series, but we didn't like really get in depth with him. But this series is about Hook and Croc, which is like the crocodile. He's actually like a person, like a character in this story, which was really, really interesting. And then also Wendy is the love interest for Hook. So these 2 books were so good. I had no idea what to expect kind of going into them. And these were actually the ones that I was kind of talking about earlier, where I just felt kind of like slumpy in the middle of the month, and I wanted something just like quick and fun to read. And usually when I feel like that, I grab for smut, essentially. So I was looking for some smut, and I actually was thinking of the Never King series. So I was looking up other books from Nikki St. Crow, and I didn't even realize that these 2 books existed. So I was very excited to kind of get more from that world, because it was so good originally. And yeah, these were no different. I absolutely loved them. I will say I didn't love them as much as the Never King, but they were still really, really good. Now moving on to the last couple of books that I read this month, which are the ones that are the most fresh in my brain, because I literally just finished one of them last night. We have the 2nd and 3rd book in the Magnolia Parks universe, and I honestly don't really know how to feel. First of all, we read Daisy Hates. Well, actually, first of all, I read Magnolia Parks, the first book in the series, well over a year ago, and I liked it enough to like purchase the rest of the series. But honestly, like looking back on that book, I don't really remember a whole lot from it, and I honestly don't really remember feeling too fondly for BJ or Magnolia. Like, I didn't like not like them, but I didn't like them either. Like, I had very neutral thoughts about those characters. That being said though, the reason it took me so long to pick up the next book, which is Daisy Hates' story, as much as like I had very neutral feelings about those 2 characters, I wanted to just continue their story, and I didn't want to have to like stop it and then start a whole new person's story. And I'm kind of like resisting reading this one for so long, because I loved Daisy and Christian's story. Magnolia and BJ's, however, I'm done. There was literally like at least 5 times while I was reading this book that I wanted to DNF this book, because I was just so over the back and forth with Magnolia and BJ. And the only reason I finished it was because I want to continue the series for Daisy and Christian. That being said, on the whole, like whether I'm a Daisy or a Magnolia girl, definitely Daisy. I absolutely love this book. I had the same feeling that I had with the original Magnolia Parks book, but like even stronger, where I really did not want to start this book. I just wanted to pick up the next Daisy book. But anytime that I've mentioned that in the past, like kind of skipping books and just sticking to one storyline, people always tell me to just read them in order. So because of that, I did go ahead and read this one. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm kind of annoyed. I'm kind of annoyed by it. I wish I hadn't, in a way, because like this book left off on a cliffhanger with Daisy and Christian, and this one I feel like gave random little spoilers throughout the entire book, like a few different spoilers to like what's gonna happen in the next Daisy book. Like I feel like I already, like I don't know any kind of detail, but I feel like I know like a general idea of what's gonna happen with them. And that really, really irks me. So I kind of wish I hadn't read this book in between the Daisy books, but what is done is done. Maybe I'll feel differently once I read the next Daisy book, but as of right now, annoyed by that. I feel like I'm very scatterbrained with this. Let me try to like organize myself. So let's talk about this one really quickly. So this one again is about Daisy and Christian, who we did catch a little bit of a glimpse of specifically Christian in the first book. Again, I read that so long ago, so I don't really remember the plot of it at all, honestly. But I do remember Christian and Daisy very, very slightly being mentioned near the end of that book, I'm pretty sure. And we got the backstory of Christian in this one because this book is in the perspective of Daisy, Christian, and Julian, who is Daisy's brother. And I'm gonna be honest, in this book in particular, I couldn't have cared less about Julian's perspective. Anytime his perspective came up, I was just kind of like, ugh. Obviously, we needed his perspective in certain instances within this book, like things were going on outside of the romance that he was a part of. Also, we got obviously more of a backstory on like who he is, which is important because he does pop up in this book. And in this book, I ended up falling in love with Julian. I ended up rating this one a 3 in my Fable, but it is very close to like being a 2.5, 3. BJ and Magnolia just in general are very, very obnoxious to me. I don't really like their characters. And also specifically in this book, I remember in the first one thinking that it wasn't as toxic as everyone like made it out to seem. This one it is. Like they are so back and forth and it was so irritating. Literally all you have to do is like say how you feel and everything would be solved, or at least on the way to be solved. But these two just have like no communication skills whatsoever. They both have like no self-control. They have to like one-up each other, which causes a lot of problems. But also too, I feel like this might be an unpopular opinion. I haven't like watched any kind of reviews for these books in a very long time, so I don't really know how people feel about Magnolia and BJ. But BJ specifically, I don't like him. Like I don't think he's a good boyfriend whatsoever. There were several instances in this book that were just like, why are you still together? Like why do you like him? Because he's not nice to her. I don't want to give away any spoilers obviously, but there's one specific scenario where I'm just like, how did you get over that? Because I couldn't have. Actually, there's several situations that I would never have gotten over. But anyway, because this is in the perspective of BJ and Magnolia, you do get BJ's like inner dialogue, and in his inner dialogue, he is so sweet. He definitely loves her and all that stuff, yada, yada, yada. But the actual actions that he does and like the things that he actually ends up saying to Magnolia are never good. Leaving thoughts on this book is I'm not rooting for them. I don't want them to end up together. I feel like they probably are, but like, I'm not rooting for them. They need to both just call it a day. You know what I mean? Be friends maybe, but like they shouldn't be romantic together because it's just not a good time. I don't understand why they're together, which I get is kind of like the whole point of this series just in general, but I don't like it. This one had its issues, but like in a way that didn't bother me. This one just was irritating. Again, I wanted to DNF it so many times. I was just so over it by the end of it. That being said, it did end in a very bizarre way that I was not expecting, and I'm intrigued to see what's going to happen. So kind of like leaving both of these books, I am definitely interested to like continue both of the stories. This one, not because of Magnolia and BJ, but this one because I really need to get back into this romance. And I am very excited that I do have a Daisy book to follow this monstrosity up with. So with that, those are all of the books that I read in May. Overall, I feel like I had a pretty good reading month. Let me know in the comments what your favorite and least favorite reads for the month were. For me personally, I think the Cowboy Colony book was my favorite, Daisy was my favorite, and then also I did, again, really enjoyed the Paper Princess series, specifically the first 3 books. Least favorite of the month, without question, this guy.